What's going on, y'all? It's your boy DameSmiff, and today we're gonna have a conversation about buying equipment versus equity, whether or not it's the best decision for you as a musician and as an artist. So make sure you hit the like button so that way you can catch all of my latest videos and let other people know that this video is dope, and then also hit the subscribe button. So today's conversation, like I said, is about equipment versus equity. What should you invest in? And the key thing about this is that this conversation is really going to elevate the conversations you will be having with your musicians, right? And it'll be more of a grown-up conversation. You ever had a conversation with somebody and like all they want to talk about is like surface level things, like what's happening in the day in front of them, or like very, very monotonous, not important conversations, right? Well, a part of that is how we're going to look at this conversation, right? So when you're having a conversation with musicians, sometimes they'll talk about like the instruments that they play, maybe the songs they know. I always talk about here, like the scales and things they can do on their instrument, right? But how many musicians are actually going to bring the conversation to you, or when you bring it to them, engage in a conversation about wealth, investing, and obviously retirement and things like that, right? Many musicians shy away from this stuff. Honestly, regular people do, because they act like knowing financial literacy or being financially literate is some kind of like magical myth. And then on the other hand, they also have some kind of like stigma towards wealth and wealth building. So we're going to dive through a lot of that, but just have that in your mind throughout this conversation about how you go out through your day and how do you consider spending your time? How do you consider spending your effort? How are you being beneficial to people around you and things like that, right? So if you wake up in the morning and pretty much from the first half of your day, it's all self, what you want to do, consider that. And then if you're also a person where you think that every time you get up, there's nothing that you have for yourself, then consider that as well. But either way you view your first half of the day, I want you to look at what it's investing in, right? So a lot of people will think, oh, I'm doing everything for everybody else and it's just so bad, and complaining the whole time, not understanding that the things that they're doing for others actually benefits them as well. And then on the other hand, you have people that are extremely selfish, that don't want to do nothing, they're super lazy, they're not go-getters, they don't wake up in the morning and got like a go-getter attitude and, you know, get shit done. they also don't see the detriment that they bring to others. So it's a more of an understanding conversation we're going to be having today, but we're going to be having it through the idea of what you prioritize as a musician, which should shine a light on how many people prioritize things that they spend money on or things they consider wealth building and things like that. So, like I said, we're going to get into that, and our macro minute is going to be Nvidia's AGI vision and shifting from labor-based production to system-based production, or system-based innovation, really. And then we'll get into the music side of things, the music tech things, where we'll talk about the quality saturation. And the technical production is no longer a competitive advantage. So, like, when you consider all these people that are like, oh, I'm using AI to make artists and stuff like that, it's not really an advantage anymore, right? It's being kind of like leveled out right now. And pretty quickly, we talked about this, I think, on Monday about exponential changes. And then we'll get into some music business as well, where we'll be debunking gear acquisition syndrome. Have any of you ever heard of that? Basically, what that is just whenever like a guitar player or something like that gets like a new pedal or a new special effects or something like that, what'll tend to happen is what happens to many people, where they'll get lifestyle creep. They'll start to make that their standard, like, oh, this effect does this effect does that, and they'll start upgrading nonstop. And it'll start to lead into, let's say, profits and things like that, or just making sense for their budget, right? So, like, I recently got some upgrades for this live stream, the computer, my instruments, and stuff like that. But then if I had kept going and started buying like decals, stickers, accessories, t-shirts, and stuff like that, though that stuff is cool, it has to make sense for like the budget and what we're trying to actually invest into. So we'll take a look at that as well. And then, so hope you guys are ready for this. This is going to be a pretty business forward stream. You know, it's pretty easy to do. But our first clip, we're going to get into the Nvidia AGI vision, and let's get it.
Creators, take these 3 apps I built to run my business made with Base 44. They're ready for you as free-to-use templates in the link below. Let's talk productivity.
We're gonna skip that.
As a one-man show, I have to handle everything myself, so
I guess I have to log in with my account on there. Here we go.
You said, I think accurately, that the AGI timeline question rests on your definition of AGI. So let me ask you about possible timelines here. This ridiculous definition perhaps of what AGI is, but an AI system that's able to essentially do your job. So start, grow, and run a successful technology company that's worth
a good one or a one.
No, it has to be worth more than $1 billion, more than $1 billion. So, you know how hard it is to do all of those components. So how far are we away from that? So we're talking about OpenClaw that does all the incredibly complex stuff that are required to first of all innovate, to find customers, to sell to them, to manage to build a team of some agents, some humans, all that.
Okay. I don't know why he's talking so slowly and so disjointed for him to have a question to ask this man, but essentially he's asking him to define what AGI is. And so for those of you who don't know what AGI is, I went ahead and looked up a bit of the information, but off the top of my head, I'm gonna give you what essentially it is. It's artificial general intelligence, meaning like a AI model or an AI engine can just function on its own. Like, you can just essentially turn a switch on and it can just function on its own, right? So let's say in a specific situation, like in healthcare, this AI model has a certain objective or initiative, right? And so we give it one, say, like, you have to maintain this hospital by whatever metrics a really good hospital is supposed to be maintained by, right? What they're suggesting is that they've already achieved the ability for that to happen, where like you can have an AI systems essentially, I guess, oversee the documents, oversee the financials, oversee the hours, the scheduling, oversee, the sensitive data, and be able to manage it to our standards with our supervision, ideally, right? But the issue is, what does that look like when you put it into, application? So let's say, just like the Terminator movie, it starts to realize that a lot of the things it should eliminate to make things more efficient are things we really enjoy, like, brains and skin, things that make us fallible little meat sacks called humans. It probably realizes that that kind of is not as efficient as it can be, right? And it starts overcorrecting, right? That's one thing. And then the other side of it is, what if it just gets something wrong exponentially, like we have seen? Like if I type in Gemini, like, hey, create an image of a cat skateboarding with a helmet on, it might do that, but the cat might have like human hands or something, or like human legs or something. Something weird would happen, right? And so those little mistakes like that, we can't have on a macro scale, which is why there has to be so many checks in between giving AI so much power as far as general intelligence, like just to be able just to think, right? So it would be the conversation that you would have, and this is really the tough part with this, especially in a culture of freedom and people are entitled to certain pleasures. But it's a really tough conversation to have because this is essentially like inviting a brand new person that you've never met before into your home or your government, and you realize that this person has no, I guess you can say, predictable potential. So let's say you have a kid, right? Your kid comes with predictability. Like we know it's going to be a human, more than likely it's going to have, a certain outcome of gender, a certain outcome of lifestyle, depending on how you raise it and stuff like that. Like we can predict these things, right? When it comes to how we manage that, usually we set up laws, certain expectations, like you got to get your shots, you got to go ahead and get insurance, you got to get a social security number, you got to get your fingerprint into the database so we can track you and all that stuff. You got to pay taxes, whatever it is. All of that stuff helps us understand how to maintain you, your lifestyle, keep you healthy and safe, right? On the other hand, when it comes to AI, that same amount of power that a human would have is now in a system that can think on its own, right? Now, its ability to think on its own is because we have granted it such ability. So now the question about most of this should be around the ethics of artificial intelligence, like whether or not it should be treated as something that can stand on its own, like let's say animals in some cases, or should it be treated as a tool, like guns in other cases? So what they're basically explaining in the context of Nvidia here is that AGI, artificial general intelligence, is currently defined more as a functional or commercial milestone rather than a purely biological or cognitive one. While many in the tech industry view AGI as a distant goal where AI can think exactly like a human, the Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang has recently made waves suggesting that by certain definitions they've already achieved it. In a recent discussion, March 2026, Huang redefined AGI, the AGI goalpost, using an operational benchmark. He argues that if AGI is defined as an AI system capable of independently creating, launching, and running a technology project that generates $1 billion in value, then the technology is already here. So the logic is that AI agents can now write code, develop web services, handle basic marketing, and Huang posits that an autonomous agent could launch a viral app or service used by millions, hitting that $1 billion valuation even if the business is short-lived. Like let's say Lemonade or Threads or Blue Sky or something like that, right? This moves the focus from does AI have a soul or conscience to can the AI perform a complex, high value economic task autonomously? Now, if we stop there, that sounds really cool, right? But then the ethics behind it is like who gets the money, who gets paid. We just had a conversation about royalty statements for artists and stuff like that, right? Contracts and things like that. So if someone makes something like that, who owns the app? Right? So similar to musicians, like if you were to use an AI system and you create an entire musical catalog and you want to sell that catalog, who owns it? Like if Jermaine Dupri yesterday, we were talking about him linking up with Crisscross. If it wasn't Jermaine Dupri, but it was an app that sent you an email autonomously, asking you to join its record label, and it taught you how to rap, it taught you how to do everything because it could just teach you, and you pulled it off and made money. Who owns it? Who gets paid? Right? Does the creator of the app, who is not a musician, gets paid? Does the app do it? Do the artists get paid? Like, how does this make sense, right? And so it says Nvidia's stance is often contrasted with other leaders like Sam Altman from OpenAI, who views AGI as a system that outperforms humans at most economically valuable work and is still thousands of days away. Huang distinguishes between two types of AGI. Operational AGI, which is scaling and monetizing at lightning speed. The version he says is here. And then the other version, which is civilization AGI, building enduring institutions, reasoning through deep philosophy and long-term planning. The version he admits is still far off. So when we consider these two things, it seems like the ability to create very quickly is here, but the ability to think is not. So now we have to really delve into, again, the kind of powers that's going to be using this, and whether or not there's going to be wielded as a tool, a weapon, or whether it's going to be used just, by idiots in general.
That kind of stuff. Is this 5, 10, 15, 20 years away?
I think it's now. I think we've achieved AGI.
You think you can have a company run by an AI system like this?
Possible. And the reason for that is this: you said a billion, and you didn't say forever. And so, for example, it is not out of the question that a claw was able to create a web service, some interesting little app that all of a sudden, a few billion people used for 50 cents. And then it went out of business again shortly after. Now, we saw a whole bunch of those type of companies during the internet era, and most of those websites were not anything more sophisticated than what OpenClaw could generate today.
Interesting. Achieve virality and monetize that virality.
Yeah. It's just that I don't know what it is, but I couldn't have predicted any of those companies at the time either,
You're going to get a lot of people excited with that statement.
Yeah, no.
They're
yeah.
like, what do you mean? I could just launch an agent and make a lot of money?
Well, by the
Well, and this is another part about what I was talking about, like people's attitude towards wealth. The idea that you can just push a button and start making money, I don't know where this low level thinking spawns from, but he is right. That will excite a lot of people just with the thought of being able to do that. But there comes certain characteristics with people who think that way, and I don't know why or where it comes from. But the man who's talking right now, that's not his goal with what he just said. Like, his goal wasn't to just, I want to create a little app that's like a rug pull and just make money. So the fact that he is as successful as he is, and then for someone to try to use what he's explaining to be wealthy with the thinking that they have, as far as I'm just gonna make a quick little buck doing this, I don't know where that comes from. But a lot of that will be highlighted in this conversation, because what he's basically banking on is that, or explaining us, what he's basically explaining to us is that a lot of these AI systems that we're seeing work a lot smarter, or are capable to be worked a lot smarter than we can get our brains wrapped around, right? So as much as you want to just flip a switch and make a bunch of money, the concept of doing that already exists, is what he's saying. Like, the concept of using AI to basically code, market, develop, and maintain an app that could basically, like you said, charge a nominal price and get a bunch of people to just dip into it, it exists there. The problem that most people are going to have when they try to apply this is, like, how do you get that to work? He even said himself he doesn't know, like, how to predict what people are going to, love or hate and things like that. Like, there was a time where guys and girls were walking around with giant red boots just to take pictures in them. Like, humans are weird, and they don't make sense a lot of times. And the other part of it is that they are really happy to not make sense of things, and they are okay and satisfied with not making sense of things. So then when you get a situation of, now I have to figure out how to survive here, what he said sounds like an opportunity. But again, if you're trying to navigate the human phenomenon, the consistent thing that you want to try to do is solve a problem for people. And that's what he's presenting here, is that the concept of doing that is available, which solves a problem for people who are thinkers. If you're not a thinker or a hustler, then this isn't really going to matter to you. But yeah, it's going to excite a lot of people, but in application, I think most people are going to fall flat when they try to do this and thinking, oh, I'm just going to do this and think nothing bad is going to come of this, or it's going to be easy.
The way it's happening right now, right? You know that when you go to China, you're going to see a whole bunch of people getting their claws to try to go out and look for jobs and do work, make money. And I'm not actually, I wouldn't be surprised if some social thing happened or somebody created a digital influencer super cute, or some social application that feeds your little Tamagotchi or something like that, and it become an out of the blue an instant success. A lot of people use it for a couple of months and it kind of dies away. Now, the odds of 100,000 of those agents building Nvidia is 0%.
So 100,000 of them agents building Nvidia is 0%, right? And so he's kind of showing that, like, yes, like you said, the concept is there, but you guys still have to think beyond a certain point to be able to pull it off, right? So now we're going to get into the next clip where we're going to talk about how AI can replace analog warmth for very cheap, right? And we're going to react to the diminishing returns of human technical perfection. And this is the part that kind of contrasts with what we just saw. So this is going to show you how important the human side of utilizing AI is going to be.
What if there was a song about Lost in Translation in the style of jazz?
Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you who I think has already won the AI music race and why. Okay, so if you go to the App Store right now and you look up the most downloaded music apps, you'll see Spotify as number 1, YouTube Music number 2, Shazam, which is basically like a search thing. If you're hearing a song in the mall and you want to know what it is, you hit Shazam, it'll tell you what it is. And then the 4th is Suno, the AI music app. Now, recently there have been some big announcements regarding AI music. The first is that UMG and Udio have partnered after settling a copyright lawsuit, creating a new music AI platform. The new platform, launching in 2026, will be trained on licensed music from UMG's catalog, providing revenue for artists and songwriters. It doesn't say anything about the label, because you know that most of the money will actually go to the label. The original Udio platform will be altered and the existing users will be transitioned to a new model, which will have different terms of service and features, such as the ability to create music in the style of participating UMG artists. And next, in the past week, there was an announcement that Warner Music Group has reached a deal with Suno to do roughly the same thing. If you want to compare the adoption of the two AI music platforms, all you need to do is go to the App Store and look at how many reviews they have. Suno, as you can see here, has 141,000 reviews versus Udio, which has a mere 1.2 thousand. That is a massive difference. So why is Suno being adopted more than Udio? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's that it's way easier to use, way easier to create a song. Everyone that I know that's using AI, and I'm talking professional songwriters all over the place, have admitted to me privately and some on camera that they're using Suno.
So the guy that we talked about yesterday, that was the CEO of Suno, I believe, how he explained that he didn't like the creative process. It was too monotonous, too tedious, too boring. It wasn't satisfying for him, right? So that's how he came up with Suno. That, I guess you can say, mindset of what I personally would call laziness, but other people will call intuitiveness, really will bleed into the kind of music that's going to be created, right? So now when you think of, or at least consider, AGI, something that can, let's say, create an app that can develop or curate music for you and then deliver a quick result for very cheap. The process to get that done just like the creative process for creating a song still stands there, right? And so that's why it's very important to at least love the process enough to understand it, to where you can pull off that of which people are trying to do with Suno. So the reason I would believe that most people are using Suno, like you said, it being easier, is also combined with the fact that there is a mindset of creating good music should be easy. Now, whether you agree with that or not doesn't really matter to the point I'm trying to make here. What really matters is that that's your competition as an artist. Your competition is with somebody who doesn't like the creative process, wants to skip the creative process, doesn't need to understand the creative process, and also when you fully understand what is coming down the pipeline as far as AGI, doesn't even need to participate in the creative process.
They just are. They're also using Claude, they're using Gemini, they're using ChatGPT, but for music creation, for ideas, for production, for melody ideas to help them complete songs. And it's not just professional musicians, it's people like me and you that are using it. My main use of it is on here to just demonstrate the features and make people aware of how these particular platforms are progressing. But a lot of people that I know that have written songs their whole lives but couldn't ever get in a studio to demo them, they're taking their songwriter demos where they're just playing acoustic guitar and singing, they're putting it in there, and they're creating what sound like professional arrangements with the
and they're gonna have a realization that, one, this is a lot easier to do. Two, they have to now realize what kind of person are they, what kind of musician are they to where this is acceptable. And then three, is the investment in time and effort worth the equity? Like if you were to take your demos and you take 4 songs and then flesh them out into 12, what is the point? Like what is the wealth that you've garnered from that, you know?
Professional singer. And frankly, a lot of people up in Nashville, if they want to pitch a song, instead of going in like they used to and doing a demo session with pro session players, they just put it into Suno and they create that. And then they pitch their songs to actual real human artists. At the end of September, Suno unveiled a new feature called Hooks. What Hooks is, it's an AI music platform that lets users pair short video clip with a Suno song to create and share music-focused content.
Do y'all see like what I'm talking about? Like at least for the past month here in these little bit of clips, this looks like TikTok. Like it's structured to look like social media. But do you see how like even if these are AI artists or not, but how it kind of represents the average musician, and how I'm explaining how your desire to learn, your desire for wealth, your desire for equity is just being leveraged away from, this is a tech company that's a layer underneath the record label that you want to be signed under, that's a layer underneath a major record label, that's a layer underneath your government. So what are you really looking at here with what they're advertising to you? Now the gentleman in the video, he's like he said, he's using this just to show you the information. But actually think about this for a second. Like if you were a fan of music and you want to quote unquote be a fan of an artist, how is this helping you do that? How is this building the equity for your artist to be of a competitive, I guess you can say, chess piece on the board? Does it matter to you that that even is a consideration? Like he said, the average person really doesn't need to understand the creative process, doesn't really need to participate, and they don't even really need to be in the music industry to satisfy at least their pleasurable side of music. So then when we think of people trying to create a business using, let's say, AGI, how much effort it takes to do that, how much knowledge it takes to do that outside of just thinking you can flip a switch and get something like $1 million. Like if we're going to take like our reasonable logic and then apply it here to music, just like we will with most things, this makes no sense.
What Hooks is, it's an AI music platform that lets users pair short video clip with a Suno song to create and share music-focused content. It's designed to help musicians tell stories, promote their music, and connect with fans, similar to platforms like TikTok. You know, I actually just showed Hooks to my daughter, Layla, and she's like, Yeah, it's like TikTok, except boring. So you may ask yourself, well, why do you even want this? Well, people are using this platform all the time. You can't believe how many people I know that are using Suno, sending me stuff. You can.
Now, mind you, he's saying Suno, right? If you really are an OG, then you've heard of SoundCloud. Like, this is a consistent flow of like the tech music relationship, right? But it still stands that all the artists that you've seen that logged into SoundCloud, you still remember the names of a few.
See all the plays on here. If you go there, there's video after video with hundreds of thousands of plays on hooks. And frankly, it's just like TikTok as a social media platform. For people that want to share their songs that they create using this platform, they're going to do it there. They're going to do it on Udio. They can do it legally. They're not going to be in fear of it being taken down off YouTube or off Spotify. It's all licensed. They can use the Drake AI. They can use the Ed Sheeran AI, the Bruno Mars AI.
And remember, you can use all of those AI models because the record labels are licensing out the artist's catalogs to these AI engines, making it legal for you to then make renditions of music. So again, as a fan, use your noggin for a second, the both sides. How does that help Ed Sheeran or Drake? Right? And consider what you believe to be called supporting your favorite artist. And then I also want you to consider what I taught you about royalties, the pro rata pool, streaming. And yesterday we just talked about how artists really get paid with Jermaine Dupri, merch sales and shows. So if you're not going to shows because the tickets are expensive or you don't believe in supporting capitalism, and if you're not buying merch because you're broke or the prices are like way too high than you're willing to pay for, but then you, let's say, have Spotify on your phone and you pay $10 a month. At most, you're $120 a month or a year fan. And so now with the introduction of this AI engine, which would probably be like even cheaper, what's the point of you even having Spotify if you can just make like hit versions of songs you hear for free on YouTube? Like if you can just go, oh, I like this song, and then just go look it up and then make it on Suno, download it and have it on your phone, or just, have it ready to play. Why should Drake make music? That's the point, right? What are you listening to Drake for? What is the reason you're investing and putting equity of, let's say, your time and your listening and your attention currency into this artist?
I'm sure they're going to have charts that
they're going to have charts. Oh, that's the disrespectful part.
Eventually will go to Spotify. Once the things are actually licensed, they can play them on Spotify and they have the licensed AI things. I said this 2 years ago.
There's going to be Drake and then Drake AI. There's going to be the Beatles and then the Beatles AI. This is going to be on Apple Music. It's going to be on Spotify. It's going to be everywhere. Jimi Hendrix AI. The Weeknd AI. And people will accept these.
This is all
people will accept these. And that's the kind of real reason I'm having this episode, is to kind of show you again that triangle I've kind of created here of consumer, investor, and producer. The consumer does not mind the artist being AI, which leaves the artist even in a deeper hole to try to leverage to investors to invest into them, right? So as we get into this, we're looking at AI making it so easy for us to skip the creative process. Then we're going to look a little bit into what it takes for a conventional musician to actually pull off the creative process and how tangible and how expensive that is, and how AI is going to shake all of that up and change everything, right? But moving that aside, the biggest music snob you ever know, and this is the part that's going to probably offend most people, is that the biggest music snobs the best music bloggers your dad who has like the best 90s hip-hop lore knowledge will still enjoy AI music.
About the attention economy. Now, some of you are like, I'm never going to listen to AI music. And I'm like, yeah, that's like me when I see people talking about having robots. I'm not going to have a robot in my house. Who wants to have a robot? It's ridiculous, right? You get this thing that spies on you the whole time and can unalive you or let people know when you're not around. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? At least that's what I think. But there's plenty of people that think, oh, I'm going to have a robot. It's going to do all my stuff. It's going to take out the trash, do the dishes and everything. I mean, it's absurd to think about for me. Just like AI music, some people think is absurd and other people are like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. I had someone when I was in the UK, I think, or maybe in San Francisco, I can't remember, in one of the Q&As at one of my live shows, raised his hand, old guy, like actually older than me, probably in his 70s. He said, Rick, I want to thank you for introducing me to Suno a couple years ago because I'm a poet and I've written songs for my entire life. And here's a way that I could actually make them into music.
So, do you see what happened there? Like, and it's not even the old dude's fault, but it's just a thing of understanding. For some reason, that old man has been on this earth for 70 years, and it took for Suno for him to finally publish or at least create a full song to today's standard. Now, I don't know if this 70-year-old man didn't know how to do that. I didn't know if somebody was just discouraging him or he felt like he couldn't do it. That self-deprecating, I'm humble attitude I tell you guys to get rid of. This like, oh, I'm just a regular person attitude I tell you guys to get rid of. But I don't know what made him think that it wasn't until Suno that he could get what he wanted out of the music industry. That's the part that I'm showing you guys, is that the mindset that it comes to investing into yourself as a musician. He was on the earth for 70 years. Just think about that for a second. Like, do you see Tentacion go and he didn't even make it past, 20 something, 30 something, right? And so 70 years he's just been sitting there with his ideas, his creativity, his passions, he believes his divine talent, and has just been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting until somebody who came along who doesn't even enjoy the creative process created a tool just for somebody like him. And now he feels the confidence to step forward and then compete with, let's say, the TikTokers or, whoever's trying to get your attention right now. He might not even be trying to sell music for anything, but the fact that he's feeling confident to even create a full-fledged song, piece, or album shows you how this is changing even the laziest of musicians to the most discouraged of musicians to finally step into the ring. So now let's get into our next clip. And this is going to continue the conversation, right? And we're going to look at the John Mayer gear paradox. Now, part of this is similar to what we're talking about with AI, but it's still about more so the mindset of investing into equipment versus equity, right? So I'm showing you how we're moving towards basically a studio that can run itself, damn near, or an app that can run itself, or a technology company that can run itself. If you were to consider competing with an automated technology company for your fans' attention, how much money or how much of your effort would you invest into the equipment needed to compete? Would you start using AI systems, or would you use systems that would compete against AI systems, or would you just supplement with AI? How would you make this work, right? And I'm asking these questions because you probably don't care to think about this. You're probably sitting there like, I just don't want to think about this. But your favorite artist has a team of people dedicated to solving this issue for them, right? So I always talk about all the time how I'm like a one-man show and I'd be needing assistance and things like that. Well, AI has helped me fix a lot of that for myself. But even still, I would prefer to work with people. But just like what we're noticing here with people who don't like the creative process, the difficulty of getting something done, the difficulty of being a go-getter, the difficulty of committing to like the demands of another person and the authority and the responsibility of another person is very rare. Apparently, if you look and listen to like all the people who have businesses and jobs, they are saying consistently that it's hard to find people that are willing to work. Not people that want money, not people that need their bills paid, but people that are willing to work. Meaning, like, if you work on a farm, you actually care that the farm does well. If you work in a store, you actually care that the store looks nice, right? Willing to work. So now when we have a situation where musicians are now being introduced a creative process, almost skip cutscene button, you're removing all the people who, or at least you're not really removing, but you're pushing aside all of the people who are willing to work, because the product that everybody's going to come up with is generally going to be accepted. Like the fans will not care that Drake has AI music. They just want to hear that sound again, like how we make AI Michael Jackson music, we make AI, 50s orchestra music, whatever. We keep doing it. And so now, if you're going to be a musician and you're going to step into this ring and you're going to step into this realm and you want to start creating music and making a brand for yourself, should you, again, invest in the equipment or the equity? And so think about it this way. There are people who started their careers when there were phone books, the yellow pages. There were people who started when there were phone booths, and they did not die yet, and they still have to compete. So that 70-year-old man has watched a lot of time and technology change exponentially to still wait, to still wonder, to still not put forth 1,000% effort on his own self-centered, projection, because the tools weren't laid in front of him that he would prefer to use. So this is going to be a mindset conversation. This is not a strictly financial conversation. It's a mindset conversation. So now when you're thinking about all this AI stuff like that, right? Should you be investing in getting an AI system, in building an AI catalog with artists to compete? Or should you be getting in on the technology, right? How do you know which way to go into? And that's where the John Mayer paradox is going to help us kind of understand this real quick. So we'll get into the next one.
Josh, can you explain the John Mayer paradox?
The John Mayer paradox is a term invented while doing this video. John is one of the greatest guitar players who's ever lived and a currently living modern guitar hero who's still really relevant.
So for those of you who don't know,
invented while doing this video. John is one of the greatest guitar players who's ever lived.
So for those of you who don't know John Mayer, he's, like you said, a really, really talented guitar player. But he would be, in my opinion, he's one of those musicians that has transcended the instrument, right? You generally want to hear probably like this style of music now versus hearing him just play. Like, I'm sure if he just got online, turned his microphone off and then just played the guitar all day, people would still listen to that. But in terms of like record sales and the brand John Mayer, I think we've moved beyond his musical talent, right? So now when we're considering AGI and all this stuff like that, how many of you in the chat would listen to, if you're a fan of John Mayer at least, would listen to AI John Mayer? And if you would or wouldn't, how do you think that would support him? Now, answering that question, I need you to still consider equity. If John's record label is investing in AI, and John's record label is now investing in him using AI to create his next album, and then you as a fan are saying, well, I don't want to support AI because I want to support the artist, and he's a signed artist, how is that logically helping him? Like, you got to walk yourself through that process, right? And if you think it does, then you still have to walk yourself through that logic, right? So this is what we mean about like investing in the equity of your artist. And do you as fans really know what you're doing when you're investing in your artist or calling yourself a fan? Like, if you called yourself a fan of a restaurant, how do you identify as such, right? Would it just be eating there constantly? Would it be wearing a hat or a t-shirt with the logo? Would it be working there once? Would it be, maybe having some kind of rapport with the employees? How do you tangibly say, I'm supporting this business as a consumer?
And a currently living modern guitar hero who's still really relevant. People want to know what he uses because they want to sound like, slow dancing in a burning room or whatever.
And people want to know what he uses just as much as people want to know how to replicate his sound for their own music. Because you probably have some people that aren't John Mayer that want to use John Mayer's sound for their own music, and Suno will help them do that.
And John Mayer has a lot of years behind him and a lot of records, so these guitar rigs live, he's replicating all these albums. And he ends up bringing in Bob Bradshaw to help wire these intricate systems that look like some massive computer network military setup. And it's so expensive and so complicated. But then he can also go to a club with a pedal train Nano and like 3 pedals and a 1-spot power supply, and guess what? He sounds like John Mayer in both cases. The paradox is, it's not about the expensive gear or the elaborate pedal board. It's really about the player.
Josh?
And so the concept here, always baffles people for some reason. So this is, I'm highlighting this to show you how the mindset of people who were looking at the AGI models thinking like, oh man, I can just make a bunch of money now. And it's like, well, yeah, you could, but you also got to be the person that can make a bunch of money. Like you can't just decide to be a great person one day, right? And so that's why it's called a paradox, because you're thinking something's happening and it's not really, right? I see this a lot with video games, drivers, musicians. I can see it in so many different ways where you can see how a person is the sole reason something is successful, but it's like they're tools that just make it look cooler, or maybe it's like the packaging looks cool. So like for a musician, you may see somebody really, really talented and it may bring you to tears. And then I'm sitting there just thinking like, oh yeah, they've practiced. This is practice for them. Like this is just rehearsal. But the disconnect is that my understanding comes from having that creative process practice. I've put the hours in to create many things. So I understand that process. So a person who's trying to skip that, a person who's trying to even replicate it without having to go through it, is going to struggle with visualizing it. So that's why the Suno creator is getting as many like raised eyebrows as he was yesterday. But it's also bringing a lot of musicians into the fold because they now feel, or at least, can visualize the results of their music by breaking this so-called paradox with AI. Now they can basically create whatever they think is good music in their head through the tools of Suno and AI. But when they do it and they realize that I'm using basically what's already invented, it's already influenced and stuff like that, they now have to figure out, well, then what did I just invest in? Did I invest into myself, or did I invest into an idea? And then the third part is that the fans will still not care. The fans will still either listen to it or not and just, treat it as such. But it's a really, really tough dilemma for musicians, because you do not want to be the dude who's 70 years old waiting for AI to say, now I can finally get my music out. Bro, you got like no time left. All right, so let's get to the next one here.
From your first note.
I don't know why I'm getting ads and it's annoying, but
each one of the devices just one by one in the order that they occur in the signal path. And maybe we'll just sort of just quickly show roughly what it does. I've kind of dialed in some of the rough John Mayer settings. Obviously, there's some tolerance difference pedal to pedal. But starting first with the polytune, let's just hear how that sounds. Couldn't have done it better myself. For many years, this or a Boss TU2 were the input buffer to the entire rig. And I know as somebody that is a buffer evangelist, I talk about them often and often get accused of terrible things because of my love for buffers. I have enabled the buffer on this, which is the bona fide buffer, which I think is a decent buffer. Maybe it's not as good as the one that I would make, but for the purposes of this rig, I think in keeping with the John Mayer style and maintaining a 7-pedal pedal board, this is an obvious choice.
You can't go wrong.
And so a lot of what he's discussing with this, it's really a lot of technical engineering and craftsmanship that goes into this.
So if somebody weren't going to
hold on real quick, I want to get a shot of that.
Were the I have enabled and maintaining a.
So a lot of people, when they're building their pedal board, it's usually like a collection of things or a very specific kind of build. You can interchange all these pieces. You can pull one pedal out, you can do another. But all these things it's actually very simple in terms of results, but very, very intricate and very, very complex in terms of design and craftsmanship. So what these do, for those who don't know, is when you play a guitar and you go bing on a guitar, right? It vibrates, and that signal vibrates through a pickup, and that pickup sends that signal through the cable that comes out the back of the guitar. That same signal goes through these pedals before it comes out of the amplifier, and the amplifier plays the noise, ding, right? The thing that makes these pedals really cool is that each one does a different effect, and you can chain together the effects to get at the end of the chain a really cool sound. And then you can interpret and, change the directions and which order the chain is in and stuff like that if you get really nerdy, right? So that's pedals in a nutshell. So you can go from ding to wow. You can make a whole bunch of different noises and cool things, right? So what he's explaining is how he's designed this pedal board to kind of emulate or act like a John Mayer pedal board or John Mayer sound on your guitar using a certain number of pedals. I guess they just picked the number 7. But the point here is that what you'll notice is that this is something that he's worked extremely hard to do. The creative process to get this done alone as a musician is there, but then just think about the metal work, the electrical work, and just the, you know, the safety procedures he had to go through to get all this done, and the knowledge, right? He had to be super smart to do this. Suno skipped all of this. So when you have a situation of a record label licensing out an AI engine, Suno can skip all of this, okay? And just put you in the position of that 70-year-old dude who's like, man, I want to sound like John Mayer. He can now just click a button on a screen and all of this work can be done for him right here, right? And then he can get the same, probably the same access as far as you see all these knobs and stuff like that. They change like the volume and the intensity and the tonality and all that stuff like that. Suno skips all of that. And so for the person who doesn't really value the creative process, this is super, super amazing. For the person that does, this is still super, super amazing. But the difference is that now you'll have a kind of talent gap between who can utilize this for unique, equitable music and somebody who's just doing something that they think is really good music.
7 pedal board. This is an obvious choice.
You can't go wrong.
So if somebody weren't going to use this, obvious choices, if you were going to go for something more budget, I think you could go for the Mini, a little smaller, still offers the bona fide.
There's no shame.
No shame in that. You know, smaller sometimes is better, especially on the boards today.
It's about the motion of the tuning.
You could also go with the traditional Boss TU2, TU3. Those are still quite affordable, although I think that the TC stuff, for what it is incredibly affordable. I don't know that there's that many great recommendation alternatives to this that I would say. I think you want something that tunes relatively well, hopefully has a good buffer. All right, so let's go into the next pedal in the chain, the Katana. This is something that's been a long-standing boost on John Mayer's pedal board. I have been told by Robert Keeley ad nauseum that even though the look of the current version Katana is slightly different than Mayer's, it is still the exact same circuit. Right now we've got it in bypass. Let's just hear what we're starting with.
So bypass essentially means that the signal is bypassing this pedal. It's not being sent through the pedal, so whatever effects that the pedal has are not happening.
Now engaged at 50%.
Do y'all hear the difference, right? And so that's the essential basics of how a pedal works. You can go from like you said, 50% to a lot more intense noises and sounds and changes and effects like echoes and distortions and reverbs and cool things like that, right? Suno skips all of this. Suno can do all of this very easily. Shit, I can do it generally in Logic Pro, right? The thing that we're seeing though in real time is somebody like him, the gentleman in the green jacket, is going to have a field day when he can now exponentially take his talents to like other artists and versions of these pedal boards and stuff like that. But what is the demand for a position like his, right? If most people don't even like doing this activity that he's doing, let alone waiting for him to finish it, what is the demand for somebody like him? And now with the music industry moving towards a more technological, consumer-friendly utility style thing, we have to really consider how people are even listening to music today. Most people aren't even listening to music that is played by instruments like this. We're usually listening to guitar loops and things like that.
And at this point,
and so now when we're deep diving into like the pedals like this and how these pedals work and all that stuff like that, you'll start to now see a shift in the cost. So in order to get these things, I would presume it would be way more expensive because of the authenticity it takes to, you know, get the metals, get the chips and the wiring and the computations and stuff like that to make all this make sense. Unless 3D printing is going to be like the next thing for musical equipment, I think this level of craftsmanship is going to be almost nudged out the way, but it's only going to be nudged out the way by people and in general the fans, but people who don't necessarily prefer or care for this process. Now it's important to line this up though, because if you want to be a fan of an artist, what does it mean today, right? What are you investing in? What is the artist investing in? And most of what they're investing in is equipment, like we've seen with I think 2 days ago, was it Monday? This dude was talking about buying ads on Instagram and stuff like that. But the real equity, it seems to be like, is in your catalog being leveraged. But that again is something that, if it is leveraged, it's leveraged to what end? If you have a situation like T.I. and the Sync deal, you could be missing out on a bunch of royalties because you're not really considering AI music, or you're not considering, at least, let's say, supplementing for AI music or licensing your music this way. So this is a complicated thing. You can kind of say, oh, I'm not going to support AI and then I'm going to be a authentic conventional artist, but your competition is, and then you can be a fan that says, I'm not going to support AI artists, but your favorite artist might have to, or they might already be licensed out to these AI engines. But that's all we have for us today on this Wednesday morning. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Like I said, this one's going to be strictly about business and getting things done. So if you guys enjoyed this, let me know in the comments. Like I said, we're going to be exploring the equity versus buying equipment. And let me know what you think. Do you think many of your favorite artists are going to be moving towards AI? Are they already implementing it? Is AI something that you really need in your music? And are you a person that thinks you're not going to listen to AI? And if you do think that, how accurate are you? Like, how are you accurately avoiding AI music?